have a huge problem with memory in general. I think that I don't have one, and I don't know if thinking that I don't have one perpetuates that in my brain to the point where it becomes true. Do you know, like a self-fulfilling prophecy? Like, oh, I can't remember anything, and then my brain's like, well, if that's how you feel about me, then fuck you. I'm gonna get rid of all this shit.
When I was little, my dad would lay on 2 chairs on his back, and then with his legs dangling, like I would get on one of his legs, and he would lift it up and down, and we'd call that caballito, or horsey, and I'm looking through these pictures, and it's there, like the exact thing, you know, I found a picture of that memory, and, you know, he's on his back on these 2 chairs, I'm on his leg, and, you know, I'm so tiny, there's no way I could have remembered that. I probably just learned how to walk. I just remembered the picture, like there was no way I could have possibly remembered the event.
The following podcast contains explicit language.
We stopped doing our show in October.
Yeah.
We did it for 6 years. Okay.
How do you guys feel?
You just heard about it?
Yeah. What is your feeling about? What's your emotional state?
I was
cried a bunch.
I was sad when it happened, but now, even though it's only been a few months, it's kind of, to me, this sucks. It kind of feels like it never happened. It's this weird thing where when I every now and then I'll get a ghost of a feeling of what it felt like to do that show, but for the most part, it feels like it never happened.
I'm against nostalgia. I'm not saying I never look back, because I do. You know, Christy and I consciously chose not to have a lot of photographs on our walls, but we do have them. They're in big disorganized piles in old photo albums and bigger, more disorganized piles on old computers. And it's fun to wade in randomly and to see pictures of old camping trips, screen caps of tweets from 2010, old nudes, that kind of thing. And also, our house is new. To us, anyway. But someday, it will itself conjure memories. That was the best and smartest thing that Christopher Nolan did in Inception. I mean, I'm sure some other people have done it before, but, he pointed out just how anchored our patterns of thought are to physical structures. So as we walk around our house now, every day, our brains are becoming gradually more mapped to its architecture, and in a few years, it's gonna be some Westworld shit every time we turn a corner. And other stuff in the house and in our lives, it does the same sort of thing. Our paintings, some clothes, some of the music we listen to, the food we sometimes cook, it's always at least a little bit in conversation with the past, even as it exists in the present. But I would classify nostalgia as an order of magnitude above that kind of thing. I know the great Don Draper line about nostalgia, but to me, I guess the way I see nostalgia now, especially in this day and age when it's basically a third of the internet, is, it's when you look into the past to think about how good it once was. Reliving your glory days. I am a firm believer that one's glory days should always be ahead of one, and so one should never look back too fondly, lest ye forget. Nostalgia is dangerous. The impulse to look back and to romanticize the past is so strong. Sometimes it feels like it's safer to never look back at all. But I'm turning 30 tomorrow, so that's why I'm thinking about this stuff. Welcome to the last podcast. I'm your host, Zach Little, and this episode is about memory. About looking back, but not looking back too hard. So I'm working from home today, and while I'm sitting here, I'm watching all these old DVDs. There's some sketch comedy in there, there's some classic goof around footage, and there's a lot of old band performances. I was initially struck by just how my voice sounds. Not only like my high-pitched teenage punk rock growl, also just the way I talk.
So I decided to take a few minutes this week to get you all familiar with the prospective Democratic field.
I think I've been cycling through different affectations for years. I don't know where I'm at right now.
Don't plan to make it to January anyway.
The other thing I was struck by is how the curve that I grade my past self on, the way it changes. I think I'm always doomed to hate whatever I did 3 to 5 years ago. You know, when you make something, there's that sweet spot where, well, when you first make it, you're very ambivalent about it. You don't know if it's good or not. About a year later, you're pretty convinced it was the best thing you ever made. So, like, the thing right now that's occupying that spot for me creatively is the podcast episode about buying the house. Naive Melody. You know, probably not going to top that one. But that's what I always think. And then as things age a couple more years, they fall into this valley. Where, you know, maybe you remember it being really good, and then you look back, and you're shocked at how it's not quite as good as you remembered, and then you hate it. I think I hate virtually every video I made from, like, 2007 to 2013. Probably the shit from 2014 is falling into the valley right now.
Just a couple of them in different combinations will do. But always remember the guiding principle of the fan system. Achilles Afliak.
But then, and now this part's new to me, because I'm getting old. But you look back on the oldest stuff, and you have nothing but fondness for it. Look at those stupid kids. They're not bad, you know? You know how there are certain physical sensations that are sort of difficult to recapture? Like if you've ever tricked yourself with an optical illusion, you usually can't do it more than once. Or when you are in a car and you go over like a sort of medium-sized hill, and the way your stomach kind of lifts or something on the way down. It's cool when it happens. It's hard to recapture. Anyway, that just happened for me. Looking at a video of myself at, 17 years old with my insane Rod Stewart emo hair and my 115-pound body. And I looked directly from the TV screen to myself in the mirror right now and felt myself travel through time. But it was good for me because I was able to sort of reassure myself that I do look like an adult now. You know, for a long time I thought it was never going to happen. It did, it happened. I look like a relatively mature, reasonable, respectable person. We made it. We made it, Shosh.
So the first thing I was thinking about as far as us and like, because for this episode I was like going through old like Subjection Casual DVDs and like Righteous TV stuff, and I realized, especially as I was looking at a bunch of photos yesterday, that in part because Christy was a photographer and in part because I'm a compulsive documenter, I feel like, do you have like a lot of physical material from like high school? Like that, do you have that sort of thing?
I don't think so, no.
Because like I've got a folder with like Subjection Casual show posters, you know, somewhere, that type of shit.
I think on an old hard drive, I have like some of our recordings from the band, maybe like a couple episodes of Righteous TV, that kind of stuff, and then like I don't know, like maybe I think like some old photos, and you know this was like pre cell phone, so like, or pre smartphone, so like you know I would take photos and just dump them on my computer and then kind of not do anything. I got some stuff, but I don't think I've really collected. I think I actually have more physical photos from like the past 2 years once I got a film camera than I have of photos when I was like in high school. And
do you sometimes feel like we are like the cursed intertechnological generation? Because like we were too early for like cloud. Most of our stuff's not in the cloud,
right?
Know? But then we were like around for like all of these different transitions, so all of our stuff is spread across so many different.
It's just like it's like fragmented across so many different different mediums. Yeah, I
think about like younger kids who are going to grow up with their entire lives like built into like time hop, you know, and how well are they going to remember everything?
Or will they remember nothing? Like if their phone breaks, will they be like, who am I? What's my name? Where do I live?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, I mean, it's kind of similar to, you know, growing up. I can still remember a lot of my friends' telephone numbers growing up as a kid. I mean, like a friend of mine from when I was like 5 years old, you know, I can still remember his phone number, but if you ask me what your number is, I have no idea because you're in my phone as...
do you know Kelly's phone number?
I do know Kelly's phone number. That's probably her and like, I think my mom and my brother are like the only people whose phone numbers I know off the top of my head. But like, I don't know your number. You were just in my phone as Zach Little. I just press Zach Little if I want to call.
Yeah. In an emergency situation, I would be hard-pressed to know Christy's number for sure. Like, yeah. I would not be confident while telling it to the ambulance driver, you know?
Right.
I wonder how important your memory is for, like, the rest of your emotional intelligence and everything. Because if people are going to have better memories because everything will be backed up by, like, factual digital record, you know, of their lives... They won't have arguments over little trivia about what happened at a certain time because they can just like call it up in their Snapchat history, you know, like
right,
it's just
exactly.
There. So that might make them more emotionally intelligent too, or it might not matter. People might just become experts in their own personal history and nothing else.
So like right now, with you know, a portion of our brain is taken up by memories, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I know a lot about computers or how the human brain works, but it seems as though it's similar to, you know, like a hard drive, and if you can just dump all of your, you know, memories from long-term storage and free that up, and then be able to recall those from, you know, like, you know, on demand because of this, you know, the whole cloud-based storage, how that might impact our evolution. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's a whole topic that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it did really seem to help Dumbledore, you know, because like he could just basically take all of his memories and just drop them into that
dump
bucket.
them in that little like pool of water. Yeah.
And so he had time to be a lot smarter about magic stuff.
Right. Like what you know, does that mean, like, you know, if we could free up some of that portion of our brain, you know, what does that mean at that point? You know, we have access for other things, or is that just total bullshit? I have no idea.
Now I'm picturing like getting an interface for your brain, like when you plug your phone into iTunes, and
right.
You're like, you see it and you're like, 26 gigs of other, what the fuck?
All my life I felt as though I'm inside a beautiful memory replaying with the sound turned down low.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you, first of all, about museums.
Yes.
How did you get interested in museums?
Okay, well, I was originally interested in history, just like plain old history, and you'll find that a lot of people who go into like their degrees as history majors or art history, they don't really know what they want to do. They know they don't want to be professors or academics, so they kind of have to figure it out, and most people end up going into the museum field because it's not so academic that you're just like reading and writing or teaching all day, but you're still involved with the learning new things and being around objects or history. And for me, I didn't even realize that there was a museum side. Like, a lot of people don't think about museums having jobs, but clearly they have jobs. And I think what really started me on the track was I knew I wanted to be a history major, and I remember watching. I tell this story, and I'm just such a goofball. I remember watching National Treasure, the movie.
Yeah.
iconic film of our generation, and the main female protagonist is a archivist for the National Archive. And I went, oh, that's interesting. That's something I could do. So I kind of looked up what an archivist does, and then I went from there. And then through learning more about the sector and doing internships, I kind of found where I wanted to be, which was more in collections management side, which is very similar to an archivist, except it's with physical objects or paintings rather than documents.
So what a previous generation owes to Indiana Jones, you owe instead to like I don't want to say a slightly worse version of Indiana Jones,
but yes.
So as far as the attraction to museums, it sounds like, you know, some of it was necessity, but that also the way you've kind of found your way to artifacts and objects. And don't you feel like that's like a realer form of history? Like people, you know, it sounds corny to be like, you go into a museum and like history comes alive.
Yeah.
But it's true. Like there's the actual stuff that people used is there. And to me anyway, sometimes I feel like I go and I look at like some suit of armor that somebody wore in Mesopotamian times, and I think like, their bodies were that small? What? That looks weird. And it doesn't do anything for me. But then every once in a while you'll see something and it'll really connect, and it's like traveling back in time. It's the most authentic form of history.
Yes.
Like a letter that like Abraham Lincoln wrote or something.
I think it's hit and miss for a lot of people too, like you said about the suit of armor. I feel that a lot too, even when I'm working with the object, because holding them in my hands, because obviously seeing them behind a glass or not being able to physically like touch them in any way, it's sort of like, oh my god, my cat, sorry, the cat's trying to open the door. So holding them in your hands is, you would think that would make it a little bit more real, but even then, sometimes I'm just like, oh, this is just a teacup that Queen Victoria used. Like, I don't think about it. But then I think it has to do with what you love the most. So for you, if it's like Civil War or Abraham Lincoln, then that's going to connect you more than just like some, you know, pot from Greece. For me, a lot of the time, when I have those like feelings of like, oh my god, this is real, it's paintings rather than like historical objects. And I'm not really sure why, but maybe there's like more of an emotional connection there, which is definitely something that I should explore more about myself. But
yeah, well, I don't know, I think maybe you get double your money from like a painting, because it is this historical thing with this historical roots, but then it also has, you know, the desire of the artist and the creativity and everything. So it makes you feel even more like you can understand
that's
what
true.
It was like when these people were alive and everything.
That's true.
I think for me, the biggest one ever was, I think I at my college for a while, we had a bunch of like Bob Dylan stuff, like handwritten music, which is weird because Bob Dylan's still alive. Like if I wanted to get Bob Dylan to write on a piece of paper, I still could.
Right.
So it shouldn't be that shocking. But it was like, oh yeah, wow, he's a real person. And then when you connect that, and then you're like, oh, and so is Abraham Lincoln, and so is George Washington, probably.
Probably, we're not quite sure yet, but I think there's some evidence.
I don't buy it.
I think for me, the most that I've been kind of shocked to the core in terms of like, oh wow, this is real. This is something that happened was the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. Obviously, there's very much of like a shocking part of that already, but just being there, like I haven't been there I went to D.C. about a month-ish ago, 2 months ago, and I realized I hadn't been back to D.C. in over 10 years, and that was the last time I went to the Holocaust Museum. But it's still the museum I'll say is my favorite and most impactful on my life, even though I haven't been there in, you know, a decade.
Yeah. So it stuck with you.
Right.
Do you think it's emotionally easier or more difficult to experience the past through art? Like, think about Picasso's Guernica versus the actual bombing of Guernica. Does the painting dull the pain of historical tragedy, or does it make it more visceral? Is it somehow possible that it does both? I'm so fortunate in that I can experience my own past through creative expression too. And there, the answer is a lot clearer. I am so happy that I have those DVDs and CDs of my sketches and my band from high school, so that I don't have to remember the rest of it. And, more recently, because of my monthly vlogs, I have these really lovely, artificially constructed sets of positive memories from my 20s. And by the way, the urge to depict my life positively actually gave me a more positive outlook.
You're gonna get the Joe Biden pic? You ever see that one where he's like,
And also, eventually, is that all I'm gonna remember? Realistically, all of my memories from ages 3 to 11 or so are pretty heavily adapted from home video, right? That's less of an issue, though, because, in the early days of home video cameras, things were pretty democratically depicted. All of my early family home videos are just these sprawling 40-minute long takes. Every emotion that could be experienced within a birthday party or Easter or something, all happening sometimes at once. It's very Dog Me 95. But, by editing out every time from my 20s when I felt sad or bored or uninspired, how am I augmenting my memory? Did I cheat God somehow? Did I win by doing this? I feel like I remember dreams from being young more vividly than I remember real life.
Oh, that's
I would have
interesting.
these recurring nightmares, but they had a narrative arc to them. So even though I was tormenting myself in my sleep, I was like, I gotta tell a good story.
Right.
So there were recurring characters, and they would change over the course of dreams. They would develop.
Man, your dreams must be vivid as shit if you're remembering dreams from I feel like I remember my dreams more than most people, but I can still only recall a dream from the furthest dream I could remember is maybe from a year ago, let alone when I was 7.
I have dreams that I can connect to when I was playing a lot of Super Nintendo. So because in my dreams, I would be playing a video game and I would press pause, but life would pause instead of the game. So my whole family would freeze in place. And then this fucking skeleton in a top hat would come and he would chase me around. But he was obviously never gonna hurt me. He just wanted to toy with me emotionally.
Have you ever told a therapist or a dream a person that analyzes dreams that? Because I am really curious to see what those dreams, what meaning is behind what the meaning is behind those dreams.
Yeah, I think that's a stone I'm a little afraid to turn over. I'm not going to a fucking therapist ever. Okay, so here's a life hack. If you are like me and Christy, and you tend to let your paperwork pile up on you for months and maybe years at a time, necessitating the occasional day-long marathon filing session, what you gotta do is throw a bunch of personal fun documents in there too. Because while I'm picking through receipts, I'm also finding things scorecards from bowling matches, maps from campsites we stayed at. I found a Polaroid of me and my friend Brian dressed as mimes from when we hosted the variety show senior year of high school. I remember actually it was a 2-night show, and on the second night, I didn't want to go through with all the mime makeup because then I had to wear it later when our band performed. And also, I wasn't a very good mime, and I could tell the bit didn't really, kind of died on the vine. So we very quickly put together this opening sketch where, I read an opening message, and then Brian translated it to French, and then Jory within the world of the sketch had lied to us and persuaded us that he knew how to do American Sign Language. So Dre was like doing the Macarena and stuff. In retrospect, probably very offensive. I mean, again, like within the world of the sketch, the joke's on Jory, but in 2017, I can see how that distinction doesn't really matter. There's a lot of birthday cards in here too, and numbers from when we've run in races, which just makes me feel inactive just looking at them. We've got some old Animal Collective tickets in here, some descriptions of wine from a vineyard we went to, a menu from a restaurant that gave me food poisoning. You know, memories. Anyway, listen, will someone who's listening to this podcast remind me in the future, if I'm looking for it, that the warranty for my TV is in the folder with my passport? It's literally the only warranty that I own, so I didn't know where to put it.
See, it's so difficult, and this is what everyone says, to differentiate between a real memory and a documented memory, because I have, memory of riding around my garden on my tricycle, but it's not first person, it's third person, because it's from a video of my childhood. My actual first memory... Okay, so it's not a real one. I mean, my first legitimate memory it's really difficult to place in time, but I remember sitting in my dad's den. My dad's den is like a smaller bedroom in our house. This was when he and my mother still slept in the same room. In my dad's den, and he had a typewriter on the floor, and I was sitting in like this giant armchair that used to be my granddad's at his computer, and this is like fucking years ago, so I feel like his computer was probably like a Spectrum or something, of like a giant fuck off monitor. And I looked down, and he's sort of like kneeling on the floor, but like folded over, like as though he was crawling but stationary, like typing on his typewriter. And next to his typewriter is the biggest motherfucking spider I've ever seen. It's like tall, so it's really high. The legs are super long and they go straight down, and it has multiple rows, okay? My first memory is of something that definitely can't possibly exist. So either it was a normal sized spider, but I was, like 3, so I saw it as this beast, or I dreamt it, or it's not real. But my first memory, giant spider next to typewriter that Dad's working on. That was too long, wasn't it? Sorry if I rambled. I know I did ramble. Don't worry, just cut out. Just turn it into a different story if you want.
But yeah, I remember walking to school, holding her hand, and I just remember that, like, those crisp mornings, the sun rising. Oh, I love that light. And I remember I actually remember we had to carry a stick, like some just log burs that we find on the road, because we had to fend off any dogs, because we had a bunch of stray dogs, angry dogs in our neighborhood, and she had to carry a stick just to protect us, or just to make us feel safe, maybe to make me feel safe.
Which one's the one in Florida? Disney World?
Disney World, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is funny, because you'd think the LA one would have the like larger concept name.
Yeah, right.
Like Disney Universe, but it's like Disneyland and Disney World. The Florida one's better?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I don't know. Whatever the Florida one is. I went to that when I think I was 5. I have zero memory of being there.
Right?
But I've seen so many photos of me, like, standing next to Goofy, and like, but I even looking through all of those photos, that didn't jog any sort of, it didn't jog my memory at all to, be able to remember that time from an actual, real life experience.
Yeah,
so
I brought this up at our last family gathering, because they were talking about that with regard to, like, my sister's son. And I was saying to them, I said to my mom, I said, I think you took us to Disney World too early.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember any of it. Like, what a waste of money.
Exactly. That, like, I've had that conversation actually a crazy number of times with people, and it's like, I don't think as a parent you should take your kids to Disney World or Disneyland before the age of like 6. I don't know, like because
until kids are 6,
they're not going to remember
them in a blank, empty room. Like
they wouldn't know the difference.
Yeah, like just a room with a bookshelf. You know,
right.
like just look at these books.
I was at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston a couple times recently, and it got me thinking more about artifacts and art, and where the line is between them. Like right now, at the MFA, there's this Matisse exhibit, where they have a lot of his drawings and paintings of objects next to the objects themselves. And, like, the vases and the statues and Moroccan wall hangings he depicted in his work were pretty nice themselves, you know? It kind of throws Michael Stasic's Matisse quote into a new light for me.
I've got a page of quotes, and one of them is from Matisse, the painter, and it is, inspiration happens while you're working, so don't wait for it to get started.
Like, yeah, okay, good thought and all, buddy, but when I sit down to work on my thing, I start from nothing. I can't just walk into a studio full of naked women and cool glass bottles and be on my merry way. Outside of the Matisse exhibit, there's a continued intermingling of art and artifacts. Big, gorgeous paintings hanging over ornate furniture. Rooms full of kooky old instruments. Old silverware. Jackson Pollock paintings. I'm not sure if they're answering the question or posing it, and maybe the way you think about the art versus artifacts question shows what kind of person you are. Museums often provoke strong reactions, like if you've ever looked at art with someone who tends to scoff at everything, you know what I mean? And, by the way, sometimes I feel like it would be fun to point out to those people that maybe they're the exact kind of asshole the artist was trying to piss off with their work. But anyway, what I'm saying is maybe it works like a kind of personality test. Like, practically minded people can connect with the Egyptian forks and the Sumerian boots, but can't engage with the abstract art. And the dreamers can be moved by the paintings but bored by the furniture. And then, you know, meta-minded people like me can just wonder how they're supposed to feel the whole time.
There is no present or future, only the past happening over and over again.
Now, I think one stereotype about, you know, Great Britain or whatever is that, or just, actually, one stereotype about Europe, I think, is that they are better at remembering the past. They are better at being in touch with their past, maybe because they have more of it than, like, say, in the United States. Like, we're not as in touch with history or something. We tear down a lot of our old buildings. We're kind of, like, always thinking about the future. I don't know if that's true, but one way I guess we could figure it out is, do you feel like, by and large, Europe has better museums?
That's a hard question. I would say no. I think there's a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is that a lot of the major museums in Europe are very old. So take the Ashmolean, which is mostly regarded as the first museum in the UK, and it's in Oxford. And
it sounds like one of the lost like J.R.R. Tolkien Hobbit books or something. Like something Stephen Colbert would be able to quote from memory.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember why it's called the Ashmolean. I think it's named after somebody, you know, some old person or dead old person. But that museum has just undergone like a huge renovation. But before that, like the walls were falling down, you know, and like the British Museum. I love the British Museum, but it has serious, like, infrastructure problems. And on just that basis, like, if you walk into a museum as just a visitor and you see, like, huge chunks of paint lost from the walls or, like, cracks in the floor, that's not a good thing, you know?
It doesn't make you feel like, wow, I really am in history.
Yeah, exactly. Or, wow, this museum really cares about its objects. Like, why would they care about their objects if they don't care about the floor, you know? It's kind of what makes you think. Although that's not true at all, but I think that there's because of they have so much more history. A lot of that more superficial stuff kind of gets put by the wayside. Where in the U.S., we're very, very, like, a lot of our museums are, you know, modern designs or contemporary designs, very futuristic, very in the now. And that makes the experience better for the visitor. And most of the time, those experiences are more, like, digital, or they're more better understanding of the audiences that are visiting in the now, rather than like the British Museum, it's built for, you know, a 19th century audience.
We just saw a really great movie, Jackie, the Natalie Portman one. I think it sort of got shuffled out of the way around Oscar season, but it's really something. Also, the trailer is really something. Like, the trailer should have won Best Picture. The trailer was so good, I almost didn't want to watch the movie. I felt the same way with Where the Wild Things Are and I'm Not There. But in every case, and in this case in particular, I'm glad that I went through with watching the whole thing, because Jackie is a movie that is more concerned with ideas than plot. Definitely more concerned with ideas than accents, but anyway, there's lots of competing ideas about history and memory and loss and the sort of harrowing and heady ways they can all intersect. I rewound a scene and recorded it for this episode.
People need their history. It gives them strength. They need to know that real men actually lived here, not ghosts and storybook legends. People who faced adversity and overcame it. What you've done in this house matters.
That's kind of you, Bill. Even I'm starting to lose him. Pretty soon, he'll just be another oil portrait lining these hallways.
But I don't even necessarily want to get into all the ideas it explores and suggests, because I think you should just see it. It's a great companion piece to this episode. So finish this, then go out, rent that, then read the book That Noble Dream by Peter Novick. Okay, that's enough homework for this episode.
After you emailed me asking me these questions, I was laying in bed trying to think of a new memory that I had forgotten about on my own. Because it's easy, like, if you meet a friend from high school that you haven't seen in 10 years or whatever, and they bring up something that you've forgotten, that's really cool, because they have their high school experience was different to yours, so the things that stuck with them are different than the things that stick with you. And I was trying to, like, conjure a memory that wasn't one of my standard stock memories that I flick through every now and again. And whilst doing that, I couldn't tell if I was trying to make up new ones or not, because the way I was trying to go about it is, for example, I remember my ex that I used to live with, and I'd be like, okay, so we lived in Plymouth, and I was trying to imagine, like, walking around with him and, like, looking at his face and hoping that that would trigger a memory. But I don't know if, like, the face that I was looking at was his real face or a new face that I made up just today. Do you know? So that was really weird.
I keep looking back for artifacts to prove that you were here. A sound that's been keeps echoing. It never disappears.
When I was a kid, I was, like, obsessed with aging things. So, like, when I was a kid, I used to take, like, my baseball cards and, like, leave them outside in the sun to try to get them to, like, look older. And I would try to do it with, like, action figures, too, which obviously didn't work. Like, the paint was too good. But I don't know, I, like, wanted them to look like they were older objects. And I would bury things a lot and then dig them back up.
Oh, my God. How long would you leave them buried?
Like, a couple days, because if I didn't, I'd forget where they were.
Right.
Like, there was a dirt road by my house, and I'm pretty sure there's still some toys under there somewhere.
In, like, 200 years, some archaeologist is going to be doing digging and find it, and You just planted history.
At the movies, as I stover, walking sideways through them gutters, and you realize that the floor sticks to your feet like history.
Christy and I are going through a bin of stuff right now, and I just found a notebook with a bunch of, I suppose, code words to help us remember anecdotes from a trip. 3 earrings lost, never-ending fire, soup in cups, magic hat, mazza mazza mazza, tree trunk tarp pole, axe murderer neighbors, tarp no tarp, rain beach storm, hill spot, 9 stories, re-raw, wood chopping, huge frog, mushrooms everywhere, fire pit beer can, dogfish zin night, lost John Deere, explodey sausages, gritty bed, tarp 3, tarp 1's disappearance, rain in the pan, first shower, Mr. Z's flooding, beer garden, drinking in the bathroom, beers bigger than face, Asian pub, street market burritos, emergency shirt, street pretzel, good morning taekwondo, I remember that.
Yeah.
No cabs, no birthday party, $2 beers, Little Miss Sunshine, wood paneling, sex shop street, High Line, Coney Island, shoot the freak, Russian neighborhood, Brooklyn Bridge. I want to be well organized. I want to have notebooks that are full and dedicated to one topic. I want to have my digital work stored properly and efficiently. I want technology to enhance my memory. But I think I'm too old and or too poor and or too lazy for that to happen. Because everything's too spread out and crazy and on technology that's, 7 years too old. Then again, I think my hobbled, incoherent system has certain charms. Like, my iTunes library is mostly not in the cloud, so if we want to play music on our Apple TV, the only stuff we can find is whatever I've actually purchased in iTunes, which, by the way, stopped like a year and a half ago because I can't figure out how to do it anymore. That limited data set, it's kind of fun to experience. The other night, Christy and we were playing Scrabble and listening to music on that TV, and as a result, we were hearing all these songs that we love but haven't heard in years. Like songs from Cursive's Happy Holla.
Rise up, there's no one to worship but plenty of life to lose. I'm not saying let's burn down the church, but do you wanna hear my confession?
Or the Kanye West and Consequence song, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Hey yo, good morning America, good morning to Erica, who gave me good head while watching Good Morning America. Good day New York, have a good day in court. My niggas drive around the hood looking for good, yeah, to snort.
Or songs like West Coast by Coconut Records, which triggered a memory in both of us. A couple years ago, we finally sprung for nice headphones. We both bought a pair. And then we laid around our apartment all day, really intently listening to music, and pointing out to each other little details we could hear, like the clicking of the piano pedals at the beginning of that song. We just listened to music next to each other, headphones on, for hours and hours that day. It's a nice memory, randomly accessed via a technological storage system that is as chaotic and irrational as we are. Maybe I don't want to be well organized.
I have like a whole playlist on Spotify, just all the songs that remind me of my childhood, and I feel so safe and like united and so warm, like we're all together and we're listening to this great music.
My favourite time of my life was when I went to America for 2 weeks when I was like 15 or 16, and I couldn't even tell you like what year of school I was in, and I can only tell you what I was wearing because of photographs. I can remember very vividly touching down and just being so excited by the tarmac at the airport, but more specifically, I can remember listening on repeat to all of Bowling for Soup's albums as we went on a coach tour around like a few states, and I just had those on repeat. And I remember sitting in one of the coaches and thinking to myself, this album will always remind me of this time. This is this moment. And it was so indicative of that. And obviously, like, Bowling for Soup is very Americana anyway, so I felt that it encapsulated it as well. So when I listen to it now, I feel like it's worn off over time because I've listened to it so much to try and evoke those memories again that it's sort of like a scratch and sniff, you know? If you like scratch and sniff, every time you do it, the smell gets less and less, right? Until eventually you're like rubbing at it, but the smell's all gone. And I think memories are a little bit like that. Memories are like scratch and sniff, Zach. Excuse me, my Razor synapse just updated.
I'll get a rush of memory, and it won't necessarily be a vivid memory. It might bring me back to, a vague place or emotion or, feeling. But when I come across certain smells...
Yeah.
That happens to you too?
Yes.
Whether it's a good smell or a bad smell, it's sometimes it's really, really powerful. I think I was walking down, I was in Midtown, I think, and this is an example of like a really bad smell, but it immediately brought me back to being in Florence when I was studying abroad there. It makes sense because both cities smell absolutely terrible, but it was a very specific smell, and it was so powerful, but I couldn't place it, with a very specific memory of when I was there. It was just kind of, I suddenly felt like I was kind of back in Florence, and like the emotions that I had experienced while being there. And that sort of thing, which was really interesting because it wasn't tied to necessarily a specific memory. It was more tied to the emotion of when I was there.
Yeah, those are weird and scary.
Yeah.
Emotional. I know what you mean, and it's definitely true. It's weird that like smell is connected to that kind of memory more than anything. What about songs? Because this is something that's not as true for me, but it's true for Christy. Like, Christy has certain songs where she's like, she's like, Gnarls Barkley, that reminds me of Philadelphia. Like, when she, and maybe because she was like a school photographer at the time, and she was like leaving the apartment at like 3 a.m. to drive across Philadelphia to go do school portraits at some school, and like, so that like kind of like driving around listening to music memories are really strong. But I was just curious if that was like unique to her, or if you could like, if there are songs you would hear.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, I can't remember, I can't think of a specific song, but, or actually like Bad Romance, of like, also like, I haven't heard that song in forever, but when I do, there's just this like flood of memories of when I was in college, and like specific bars and like specific friends and everything, because that song was just fucking everywhere.
Yeah.
When I was in college, every bar that I went to, you would hear that song, and just like hanging out with friends, you would play that song, and like, so I feel like songs for me, it's oddly enough, I don't think I have much of like, there's not as much emotion tied to it as far as memories go, but I definitely can recall, pretty specific memories from music and specific songs.
I think most of my memory stuff, including the smell, including the sound, it's like it is mostly tied to like rooms or like locations, which is why the Arcade Fire lyric, like, it's like, sometimes we remember bedrooms and our parents' bedrooms and the bedrooms of our friends, is the best song lyric of all time.
Yeah.
Because like,
actually, and it's funny that you bring that song up, because that's one of those that when I listen to that album, that reminds me, and that brings me back to a lot of our memories, when we were in high school, and like, everything from the band and Righteous TV and like that sort of stuff, because like we listened to that album a lot when we were all together.
Yeah, it's true.
Sometimes we remember bedrooms and our parents' bedrooms and the bedrooms of our friends. Then we think of our parents.
Okay. You know how people say, like, those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it?
Yeah.
And one thing that history and one thing that museums do, they kind of serve as like institutional memory.
Mhm.
They help us as a nation or as a world remember things. But doesn't it seem like that's all bullshit now? Because like we all do, everyone knows like don't elect a fascist, and then we did it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I still have hope that that's...
Yeah, but is it frustrating for you, like,
Yes.
as a person who's supposed to be, like, you're, like, the person who's helping safeguard these lessons that we're supposed to learn. And
Right.
you're like, I did my job. I saved the lessons. You still didn't learn them.
I think more I get frustrated about it 100%, but then I realize that the problem is that we're not doing a very good job at teaching it or giving access to that information.
Mm-hmm.
Or that we're prioritizing other histories that don't teach as an important lesson. For instance, like going through high school, and we would always get to like World War II, and then the year would be over,
Right.
and we would never get to the modern and then the contemporary age. So like all that stuff about like the Gulf Wars and like the beginning of the Korean Wars or like any of that, like I, even as like a history major, I barely know anything about that stuff. And I think it's just, we need to kind of rewrite as a nation or as a world or whoever, rewrite how we're teaching or what we're prioritizing. Like every bit of history in some way will be important, but if we're trying to think about it in a contemporary context, and there's definitely other histories that are more important, or are more, could have a deeper effect if we ignore them. And I think that's really what, I think it boils down to more education, like institutional education rather than like institutional. But
yeah, I know what you mean. Like, yeah, the lessons need to be taught, and I mean, honestly, if I remember, don't you remember like in school being like so frustrated by like, oh, another World War II book, another Civil War book. I felt like I get this stuff. I learned this lesson. And then I also learned it from reading Harry Potter or whatever. And yeah, I just feel like, yeah, like maybe we could trim it down a little bit. I think that part of the reason that World War II and like slavery and everything are landed on so hard is in part because there's so much great literature and stuff that resulted from that. But there's also like there's great World War I poetry. We skip right over World War I in school.
Mm-hmm. And that's definitely something I realized living in the UK for a year, sort of what nations prioritize for their own histories. So in the UK, World War I is very important.
Right.
And, rightly so. They were very, very involved from the get-go. A lot of people died on their side. But then looking at my own experience, I'm like, oh, wow, like I really didn't know anything about World War I. And then... their biggest things are the Tudors. They love the Tudors, adore them. Like so much history comes out of the UK that are about the Tudors or about that era. They love Queen Victoria and the Victorian age, and then they love World War I. And those are kind of their like three big ones, where for us it would be like Revolutionary War, Civil War, World War II.
Yeah.
Because we don't have like a monarch to surround our interests.
Yeah. So where do you gotta go to learn about like? You gotta go to like Laos to learn about Vietnam.
I guess. I mean, I think obviously there's some highlight to Vietnam in terms of like the connection with what was happening domestically. But I think we teach more about the domestics rather than what we were doing internationally. So it's like, oh, it's, you know, during the 60s, not cultural revolution, that was happening somewhere else. But like a change in the nation's state of mind, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then like
because
Vietnam
teachers
is
are
sort
all
of,
baby boomers and they all want
Right.
to tell you about how cool it was.
And then Vietnam becomes like just a note on the side. It's like, oh, you know, all of these like protests were happening because of this war, but that's not as important as the protests or as the civil rights that, you know, were happening at the same time. Or
Yeah, and I also think it probably depends on where you go. Like, I think going to school in New England, there's like a heavy racial consciousness that in part comes from it kind of all exists in a vacuum, like it's mostly white people, so like they kind of overcompensate maybe a little bit. And then, you know, at least I remember from following the news during the Bush administration that, you know, in certain states they were like teaching them that first of all it had nothing to do with slavery, second of all the South won, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and that'll be like a definite difference between how the U.S. teaches history and how the U.K. teaches history, when there's definitely I mean, it's very hard to teach the same rubric and standards across 50 states, such a huge country, when each state has like a mandate of doing their own shit.
Yeah.
And then in the UK, it's like the size of Florida, so it's a lot more manageable. But
so maybe the answer is for like trying to give the next generation the actual awareness to not do what we did is, you know, as they're educated, first kind of move them around each region of the United States, then like 4th grade out to the UK for like 2 years. You know, then maybe like a couple of high school years somewhere else, like somewhere like Norway or Iceland with like a really different perspective.
Yeah.
And then finally bring them back, well-rounded citizens who will never vote for Donald Trump.
Summer is as faded as a long cicada call. Memories so bright I gotta squint just to recall.
Okay, so if I say artifact smell, do you know what I'm talking about? I was getting out from behind my drum set yesterday, which is something that I've been in possession of on and off since I was 14 or 15 years old. And right next to it is my DVD cabinet, which at this point is full of stuff that's, you know, mostly at least a decade old. And that phrase hit me, you know, artifact smell. It's kind of a combination of like aging metal and plastic, and also just sort of the accumulated invisible dust that gets on an object as it spends different periods of its life in different rooms, in different buildings. Good work. Hey, cool. Sorry, we just walked by a discarded bra on the street, and Shosh totally left it alone, which is not normal for her. Bras are typically very much her jam. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, houses are museums, and people are museums, you know? We walk around in this kind of interior museum, our individual pasts that we use to kind of process and interpret everything that's happening to us. And then we come home at the end of the day and we go to sleep in another museum, one that we've probably patterned after the organizational techniques or lack thereof in our interior museum. I'm talking about houses, by the way. I'm not talking about sleeping in an actual museum, although I did do that on a 6th grade trip one time. And then, you know, the third layer of that, to bring this all back to inception, is that, you know, some of us, the better among us, go out and build actual museums. These larger structures, patterned differently, that if done right, you know, get us to think about
the smaller versions of museums all around us. And, you know, in us. You know what I mean? Am I coming down too hard thematically right now? Sorry, I'm on a walk with Shosh, and we're both hot, and our brains are not functioning properly. But you get it, right? You get what I'm saying? By the way, I'm 30 now. As of this recording, I've been 30 for a while, and it's been going great. I've kind of always looked forward to turning 30. And fear of aging was certainly not what prompted this exploration of memory. I think I was just touching base a little, you know, just sort of like reorienting, making sure that the lessons of the past have not been unlearned. Getting ready for whatever's next.
And now, discussion questions for the last podcast episode, Modern Memory. 1. How does technology complicate memory, creativity as well? 2. Does history remember the past correctly, or at least as correctly as it possibly could? 3. How much of your own life have you forgotten? 4. Do you ever learn from your mistakes? 5. Do people change? Please discuss in groups of 3 or 4. Thank you.
Today's episode of The Last Podcast featured the voices of Mary Akemon, Ryan Lewis, Delia Rojas, Chelsea Fisher, and Ryan O'Connor. It featured music from a lot of places, but shout out to the members of my old bands, Subjection Casual and Voice Crack. You can support this show by writing a review on iTunes. I think maybe they actually call it Apple Podcasts now, but you know, the app. We'll be back soon with more episodes. Thank you so much for listening.